turning now to the situation with Iran. Huge leaks coming out of the Pentagon yesterday. This time, if you want to believe this, the Pentagon is leaking about how desperately they don't want to go to war with Iran. That is how bad the current situation is. But Donald Trump is trying to head off all of these leaks. Let's go and put this up here on the screen. Here is Trump's truth yesterday. Numerous stories from the fake news media have been circulating that General Daniel Kane, sometimes referred to as Raisin Kane, is against us going to war with Iran. The story does not attribute his vast wealth of knowledge to anyone and is 100% incorrect. General Kane, like all of us, would like not to see war. But if a decision is made on going against Iran at a military level, it is his opinion that everything will be easily won. Bookmark that for history. He knows Iran well in that he was in charge of Midnight Hammer, the attacks on Iranian nuclear development. It is a development no longer, but rather was blown to smithereens by our great B-2 bombers. So if that's the case, then why do we even have to go to war? All right, this is why everybody should actually read these things carefully. Raisin Kane is a great fighter. He represents the most powerful military in the world. He's not spoken to of not doing Iran or even the fake limited strikes that I have been reading about. He only knows one thing, how to win, and if he is told to do so, he will be leading the pack. Quote, I would rather have a deal than not, but if we don't make a deal, it is a very bad day for that country and very sadly its people, because they are great and wonderful and something like this should never have happened to them. So this followed an extraordinary amount of leaks that came out of the Pentagon. Let's go and put these up here on the screen. I want to kind of Washington explain. You hear one story, that's one thing. When you have Axios, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal all write this headline, Trump's top general warns of Iran strike. Trump's top general foresees acute risk in an attack on Iran. Pentagon flags risk of a major operation against Iran. Here is what is happening. These are authorized leaks from the very, very top of the Pentagon. What they want is to get on the record as close as they can without going outside the chain of command to say, this is a really, really bad idea. And if you actually read all of their warnings, if you've been watching this show or if you've been paying attention to the news, none of this will be a shocker to you. They say, we have a limited amount of air interceptors. We used 25% in the 12-day war. The Houthis were a huge problem. Because of our 4-year support now of Israel and of Ukraine, we are dramatically low on munitions. They point to a CSIS war game from 2023, which said that the United States would last 1 week in terms of munitions if we were ever to get into a war with China against Taiwan. You think I'm joking. This is 2023. The situation's gotten worse. We've actually given more to Israel and Ukraine since that time period, and the amount of spin up in our defense industrial base has actually gone down. So you can see that for them, they know, look, we can kidnap Maduro all day long. We can Midnight Hammer 6 B-2s with a place with no real aerial defense or any of that, whatever. But a real war, like ballistic missiles flying around, which we saw in the 12-day war, that alone drained 25% of our THAAD interceptors. The Pentagon is doing everything they can to try and have their Eric Shinseki moment. And look, bear with me. It's a little bit of a trip down memory lane. But back in 2003, February 2003, the Army Chief of Staff, Eric Shinseki, was forced to testify before Congress before the invasion of Iraq. And the Army Chief of Staff stunned America and the world when he said it would take several 100,000 troops to invade Iraq successfully. The neocons like Mark Levin and, Bill Krystal and the Bush administration said he's a raving lunatic, it's an absolute lie, and they fired him. They forced him out of office. He was the Army Chief of Staff, but he was trying to warn all of us. And there were multiple other top generals internally, some who resigned, people who told the president to his face, this is a bad idea. They leaked as much as they could, but our media was very propagandistic, just as it is right now. They were trying their best to do something like this. The professionals, and remember, these are not bleeding heart liberals. They're not anti-war like me. Dan Kane was one of the foremost proponents of the Maduro raid. He knows the capabilities of the U.S. military. When you have these guys going like, please get us off, like, do not make us do this, it is a blaring, like a flashing red light for the whole, because nobody knows our capabilities more than them. So when they're warning like this, they're doing their best. First of all, they want to survive. They want to be able to have the headline there in the future so that when a Democrat comes into the power, they're like, listen, man, we tried to tell him, he ordered us to do it. But more importantly, they're trying to signal for those of you who are close watchers and observers to say, this is not going to go like the propaganda is. And it's already happening. Mark Levin It's been 20-something years. He's doing the same thing. These are Democrat, deep state, isolationists trying to destroy. You have Trump now trying to box the general in. He's going to try and force him to go on the podium and say, actually, it's going to be a cakewalk. I hope he says the word cakewalk. I really do, just so we can have all the Iraq stuff happen again. I'm not claiming it's going to be the same as Iraq, but it's the same type of playbook. These are very sophisticated actors. This is the biggest warning. And when the professional warriors tell you this is a big problem, you should listen, because what they're talking about, this isn't ideology. This is about logistics. This is about munitions. This is about defense industrial base. Nobody knows this better than them. This is the most worrying thing that I've seen yet. Yeah. Because this means it's happening, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is like a desperate cry for help, a last-ditch Hail Mary pass to try to, persuade Trump and whoever that this is going to be a terrible idea. This is a warning to the American public. It's all of those things. And, I think why the neocons are pushing so hard right now is a few reasons. I mean, the Iranian government is genuinely weakened at this point from the 12-day war, also from the protests and the opposition movement, from the economic warfare that we've waged against them has been quite successful. So they are weakened in this moment. But are they weak enough where, an airstrike will take down the government? Because that's their fantasy is, let's put aside, nuclear, ballistic, blah, blah, blah. What they really are after is regime change. And at the same time, the Israelis, who are obviously, constantly pushing for war with Iran, and Netanyahu has been pushing for war with Iran like before you were literally born.
Yeah, no,
literally, you can go back and watch the clips from the 80s and whatever. Anyway, they have their own sort of looming crises internally. Even though there was a lot of unity around the Gaza genocide, the reality is they have major demographic and major economic issues. And they've had a lot of brain drain from their country. The fastest growing part of the Jewish population in Israel are, the type that don't want to serve in the military and don't want to work and just want to rely on the social safety net. So they have their own timeline here of we've got to act now or else we're not going to be able to cement our, grander ambitions of the Greater Israel Project and having total regional hegemony, which is their ultimate goal. So they're pushing very hard right now as well. And that's why you see the Mark Levins of the world, the Lindsey Grahams of the world, et cetera, sort of freaking out and aggressively pushing in this direction. But I think the reason there's been hesitation at this point is because there's no, the whole thing is insane and it's going to be bad. But even from their perspective, there's no Delcy Rodriguez type option that's available in Iran.
Yes.
The thing we covered previously, this idea of, we'll do a limited strike and then that's going to force them to buckle to our demands. What even are our fucking demands, right? They're constantly changing. The American people has not been bought into any sort of, rationale for why we need this war with Iran right now. So, and the reality is a limited strike is likely to have the exact opposite impact. It's going to harden the Iranian government against any sort of deal. What, you're going to bomb somebody and you think that's going to make them come to you? That's going to, open them up to further talks? I don't think so. So, yeah, I don't know. It's looking pretty grim. It seems very unlikely that you amass this level of military power in the region to just to have fun, to spend money, as a threat, and don't do any of it.
Venezuela's the playbook. Oh, we're negotiating, maybe not. Listen, all right, you don't just bring carrier strike groups and all of this naval armada for the biggest buildup of force in the Caribbean since the Cuban Missile Crisis, just not to use it. Same with Iran. You've got 2 carrier strike groups. You've got all the bases. You had the evacuation just yesterday of non-essential personnel from Lebanon. You've got all this diplomacy theater that's going on. Basically what they're trying to do, it's very Iraq-like. We give Saddam 90 days to resign to let in the inspectors or rain, hell will rain. It's not going to happen, right? Eventually how the story is going to end. This diplomacy is fake. This entire thing was allegedly about the nuclear deal. The Iranians have said, fine, we'll do a nuclear deal. They're like, well, it also has to deal with ballistic missiles and your regional terror threat. And they're like, no, we're not giving up our ballistic missiles so that Israel can attack us at will at any time that they want and regime change us at will sometime in the future. Why would they do that's effectively surrender. We might as well fight and actually try to convince the Americans that we have some sort of credible deterrent. This is where, to highlight the Israeli problem here, it is immense because if it was just up to the United States, I do believe that we could probably reach some sort of nuclear deal. But the Israel angle here is that you have this rogue state which has now built up years where they have been bombing 7 different countries with total impunity, with diplomatic cover by the United States, with a population with its blood, boiling, ready and believing that they can do anything, not to mention Gaza. And they're like, look, we're gonna do it no matter what. And so if they go in and attack Iran, kind of like in the 12-Day War, what happens? We're gonna get sucked in. And this is an argument, by the way, from the neocons, because they're like, oh, well, that's why we should just go ahead and do it and defend Israel in the process. But the point around it is if we actually dealt with the Israel problem, we wouldn't even have as much of an Iranian problem. But we can't get away from it. And I was telling you this morning, it's like World War I. Does anybody just sit for a second and just be like, do we have to defend Belgium? Do we have to, decimate our youth and kill millions of people just because of a piece of paper or because we've always done things that way? But this is how it happens. You really, you read about it, but nobody sits for a second and says, maybe we just tell the Israelis, you're done if you do this, that will actually cut you off. Nobody in the White House can even think this way. Nobody in the previous White House could think this way either. Nobody in Congress is even doing anything. I talked about the Eric Shinseki. At least he testified before Congress. Raising Cane is leaking this shit to the Wall Street Journal and to Axios. We have no opposition. We have nothing. Like, if anything, this is 10 times worse. We're sleepwalking, just like the book, The Sleepwalkers, right into this disaster. And, even though it's all out in the open, 99% of Americans have no idea that this is going on. They're living their lives. They're vaguely, Iran, something, didn't we bomb them before? But they have no idea. They're going to wake up, though, when something like this happens. It could all go south like this.
And you have to layer on that the mentality of they just did this Venezuela thing that they see as this grand success. They see the 12-Day War last year as this grand success. There's nothing Trump loves more than, his glorious soldiers going into battle and him being able to feel like a real man based on what actions that other people took. And, he's itching for that. I think that's, an important part of this mentality is they feel like, oh, the naysayers like us previously who were warning about all these dire consequences, they're just a bunch of panicans, they were wrong, everything turned out fine, this was all great, and this will be another glorious success for us to be able to talk about and take the focus off of Epstein and the poor economic numbers and everything else that's going on, the ICE killings, all of that stuff, and be able to have this win and assert our dominance heading into the midterm elections. Kyle always brings up, and I think it's worth pointing out, Trump, during the Obama era, used to talk constantly about how Obama was going to start a war with Iran to save his political prospects. And I think that's worth pausing on because it does give you a window into how he thinks about these things. He thinks it will be a benefit. He thinks there will be that rally around the flag effect and it will help to bolster him and bolster his party. I think that's insane. But based on his past comments, I genuinely think he views it that way, especially when you pile on top of that the Venezuela thing and the previous Iran war.
Bad sides coming out of the White House. Trump is truthing out Mark Levin videos about why we got to attack Iran. Take a listen.
The problem isn't negotiations. The problem isn't they won't agree to this or that, or we can get the best deal in world history. The problem is them. The West needs to understand what we're dealing with. For 47 years, I don't know what it's going to take, but we need to comprehend what we're dealing with. That regime needs to be eliminated.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing with. Meanwhile, B4, let's put this up here on the screen. Tucker Carlson was spotted at the White House yesterday after his explosive interview with the ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. By the way, very funny from that one. Mike Huckabee's interview, full-blown diplomatic crisis, and even a problem for the Iran situation because, as you pointed out yesterday, if you want to attack Iran, you got to use all these bases and you got to make sure that all the Gulf Arab allies are on your side. Well, guess what? The U.S. ambassador to Israel just said, actually, all of that land and all of your countries, that belongs to Israel if they want it. And they have been calling the White House and they're like, is this a statement of official government policy?
Yeah,
are you going to repudiate
too.
this? Yeah, what's happening here? Oh, and you think you're going to use my bases? No. That's not going to be happening here. So that's, been some of the fallout. But look, I mean, we have to be honest here. The Tucker faction, thought, and all of that, it's not ascendant right now, at least from what I can tell from the outside. Put the next one up here. Laura Loomer immediately attacking Tucker Carlson. Everybody needs to be pressuring the White House to condemn Tucker. His effort to derail the GOP and sabotage must end. He thinks he can just walk into the White House like he owns the place because his son works there. Everyone with moral clarity needs to pressure the White House to end this insanity once and for all. President Trump must condemn Tucker Carlson. Not Mike Huckabee, by the way. Not the guy who literally, started a full-blown diplomatic crisis because of his insane Christian because of his insane, dispensationalist, psychotic beliefs. It's the guy who revealed those beliefs that is a problem. I want to continue on the munition side. I'll just point you to some experts. Here's Tyler Rogaway. He runs a great outlet, by the way, twz.com. They do amazing, in-depth, real logistical nerd stuff. And here's what he says. If this Iran thing really pops off, our stocks of critical interceptors, which take years and huge sums of money to build, will be really depleted. The stockpile is already an emergency. If Iran goes full send, SM-3, THAAD interceptors, PAC-3s will ran through. Once again, it takes years to restock. He says it is a dangerous game with the state of China's military activity, and then there is Russia. That is beyond North Korea. We have never built enough, lots of smoke and mirrors. Now it is critical. This will send it into another realm of crisis. Just watch. One of the dangers with open source is that you actually start to learn, how you start to learn if you read enough, you're like, wait, oh my God, we're really not prepared for this. You have the CSIS war game from a couple of years ago. You have multiple generals on the record. You have the THAAD stockpile numbers, and you're like, what a disaster. 25% just spent on a 12-day war, which didn't even involve us. And then not to mention all the short-range stuff, which the Iranians could use. Look, the U.S. military is good, but is it that good? It's one of those where, would you really risk it? And originally I thought, okay, well, we're pretty good at taking these things out, and the CIA and, from all of that. But once the top general starts to speak out, I'm like, oh, this is bad. Clearly they see some, I don't have all the information. They do. And for them to come out and to leak this, I urge everyone to take this very, very seriously. These people, like I said, the guy who literally supported the kidnap operation against Maduro, if he says it's a bad idea, you should listen. These are not liberals or, they're not bleeding heart liberal Code Pink activists.
Or anti-interventionists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And listen, I think the Iranian government is weak. I don't know what the capabilities they have, but we also shouldn't underestimate their will to fight, because for us, this isn't existential. This is like a stupid luxury war of choice for the president's ego that almost no one wants, okay? It's 80% of the US population that is like, no, we don't want this at all. In spite of, whatever war propaganda is constantly fed to us about, how terrible Iran is, what a threat it is, like Mark Levin said, to our children and our grandchildren, blah, blah, blah. We don't have the will to fight this thing. And Iran, it's in a very strategic position. They know the cards that they have, and they also will be looking and understanding this information about the drawdown of our stockpiles and understanding where some of our vulnerabilities are and where some of Israel's vulnerabilities are as well. So, and things are not going too great, I guess, in terms of mechanics. In the build-up to this potential war, and B7 up on the screen, we are already taxing our sailors incredibly. You have people who are potentially going to be deployed for 11 months. It would be the longest deployment for sailors on this USS Gerald Ford in years. And you also have issues on the ship. Apparently, some of the toilets are clogged and there's raw sewage. Apparently, they've gotten some of this under control, but it's been a mess. And a bunch of people who were quoted in this piece in the Wall Street Journal are like, after this, I'm done. I have kids. And I don't want to be away from them for years at a time. This is not my understanding of what we were going to be up to. So even putting aside the stockpiles, there's been a human cost already for all the various adventurism from the Trump administration.
Yeah, look, I mean, oh, it's so funny, ha ha ha. Oh, you signed up for this. It's not funny. You put these guys on a carrier. Look, it's not fun. You've ever been on a carrier? Like, I've only been on the decommissioned ones. It's small, and you got to sleep in these barracks, and if a toilet breaks, that's life or death, man. That sounds like a disaster. And you're gone for 11 months, shuttling yourself across the globe for a bunch of nonsense. Now you've been there, and you might be getting into a war for nonstop operations. I mean, and these are what, like 19, 20-year-olds and all that who signed up, had no idea potentially they were getting into this. This is why it's not a game, right? To play around with their lives and just shuttle them back and forth, all to put pressure or potentially just put them into war. For Israel, it's crazy. I mean, everyone is always like, oh, it's almost like a low IQ conspiracy, like, oh, America's always getting into a war on Israel's behalf. Like, guys, this one actually is it. Like, this is the big one. This is the big one. And unfortunately, like I said, Washington, everybody's going along. The Democrats, there's nobody out there. Silence, War Powers Act, shout out to Massey and Ro Khanna, but like that's going to be like a Barbara Lee situation, in terms of we can look back on in history, but at the time they're complete, they're jokes. That's how people look at them.
Yeah.
A bipartisan elite is they're either silent because they want it to go wrong or they support it. So there you go.
Yeah, and just one note on the impact of that morale and fatigue. Remember when those like fighter jets slid into the sea when the Houthi operation?
Yes.
The after action report, the analysis there was that, fatigue basically played into that. That's the reason why they were, like making whatever errors were causing these fighter jets to be lost at sea. So, it can have real operational impacts as we head into whatever we're heading into.
Yep. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.